Zoom with all the new fancy announcements.
Mike.
Yeah.
Mike. Mike, congratulations on your twins.
Thank you very much.
How exhausted are you?
Basically comatose.
Yeah, for the next 18 years. So we're not seeing the real Mike.
Yeah, this is as loose as I've been in a couple of days, to be fair.
Okay, so we've got attorneys, but we don't have,
Still need one
we
more.
still need one more.
We're expecting, is there two that are still coming or just one that we're expecting?
Expect Greg.
So Greg
and
and Tim
whoever-
Price.
And Tim or whoever.
Two, okay.
So we're hopefully we'll get at least one of the two.
Well, there's a call-in. Is that a staff or is it,
There's no callers yet.
That's
Callers
public.
yet.
So this is really funny, Debbie, but could you put the board roster on the top of the agenda since we're not in the room? Like I always use the name tags.
Oh. Oh,
There's Greg.
there's Greg.
yay?
Hey, we've got a quorum.
Yay.
Let's hurry before someone leaves.
I know, right? Greg, as soon as we can hear you, we have a quorum and we're gonna get going.
I'm here.
Okay, welcome.
Good.
Is somebody been, am I late? Oh, yeah, right on time.
Right on time. We're perfect.
It's 10 o'clock on the nose.
Okay, and then if Tim joins us, we will be extra happy. But okay, so I'm going to go ahead and call to order the October 14th meeting of the Olympic Region Clean Air Agency. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. Let's go ahead and go around and do introductions, first from the board, and then staff, and then council. So Joan, start us off.
Joan Cathy, City of Tumwater.
Wes,
Wes Cormier, Grays Harbor County.
Cynthia,
Cynthia Pratt, City of Lacey.
and Greg.
Greg Brotherton, Jefferson County.
Great, and Jim Cooper, City of Olympia. Wonderful. Fran, why don't you start off the staff and the staff can just go through the org chart.
Okay, Fran McNair, Executive Director.
Debbie Moody, Office Manager.
Mark Gooden, engineer. Robert Moody, compliance manager.
Lynn Harding, Admin Service Manager. Odell.
Billy Button.
You're muted.
Odell Hadley, and this is also a sound check.
Okay, you're good. Dan.
Good.
Dan Nelson, Public Information Officer.
Is anybody else? Mark or Mike?
Good job.
Yeah. We
Jeff
got
and Mike.
two attorneys.
Jeff Myers, legal counsel.
Mike Throgmorton, tired new dad. And lawyer, by the way. So lawyer.
Right on. Great. Thank you, everyone. That was a nice, smooth check-in. I appreciate it. So I think the chair report today, well, actually, are we good with the agenda? Does anybody have any changes? Or is everyone okay with the agenda? Give me a head nod or a thumbs up. Okay, great. So we have an agenda. So the chair report, I think, is just from Vice Chair Pratt with the Finance Committee report from this morning.
Yes, so the first quarter financial report was positive. There was a 30% taken in revenue and 27% was spent. We had discussions about a fine, a large fine and attorney fees, and was fairly large. And then we had a major discussion on the Title V balance. But other than that, it was all positive.
Okay, any questions for Cynthia?
I just would like to add Jim Cooper, Lynn here, that it's a 24% expenditure.
Oh, 24. Okay,
Just for
thank you.
clarification, that's all.
Okay. I think we're going to look at those details towards the end of our meeting anyway. So
You know, it's funny. I wrote it down 24, but then I was putting on something so I can report out and I put 27. It must have, I can't read my writing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, so that takes us to public comment. I see no public called in. Is there any public anywhere else that I should be looking?
No.
Okay, so that'll move us on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second, Cynthia Pratt.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions, comments, or polls? All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, so that takes us to a public hearing on Rule 1.11, the federal regulation reference data. Is that Robert?
Yes. Sorry, Robert.
So this is the exercise we go through annually to change the date of the federal rules that we have adopted into our regulation. We have not received any public comment. I don't think we've ever received any public comment. So literally it's changing the date for the next year. So staff recommendation would be to obviously approve this change, and that would be my recommendation.
Thank you, Robert. Any questions for staff? Okay, so I'm going to open the public hearing. Do we have anyone signed up for public comment?
Not here.
No one? Okay, seeing no one on the public line. I'm going to close the public hearing. The public hearing is closed. And then, Robert, you want action from us today?
Yes.
Yes, please.
I move that we approve the Rule 1.11 federal regulation reference date rule change.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Can't believe we didn't have any public comment on this.
I know. Someone wanting us to use a different calendar or something.
Right, the Mayan calendar, yeah.
All in favor, say
That
aye.
ended 8 years ago.
Okay.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, so that takes us to new business, Resolution 279, Budget Amendment 001, Wood Smoke Reduction Grant. Is that Dan?
Or I can take it, Lynn.
Lynn, okay, go ahead. Sorry, I don't have everything open in front of me, so I'm flipping back and forth.
Oh, no, you're fine, Jim Cooper. So Resolution 279 is being brought to the board today to seek approval by budget amendment number 1, adding $35,000 to our wood smoke reduction program. And what this $35,000 is doing basically is some changes that have taken place in the program. Is a new task was added to the program, making it easier and smoother for staff to expend funds in a task that involves all 3 counties. Right now, the contract has 3 tasks. Task 1 is Thurston County, Task 2 is Clallam, Task 3 is Mason. And in order to, what we're finding is Thurston County is, there's more wood stove replacements and recyclings happening in that county. And for accounting, we would like to move money from those 3 categories into a new task that is being labeled regional program. It'll capture all the counties into one. We've learned from this program, and that is, instead of dissecting the various counties, we're going to now wrap them up into one task. And so basically we're going to be adding that 35,000 into the new task with some additional adjustments of moving money from the 3 tasks into the new task. I know I've just probably confused y'all, but this 35,000 is going to be a complement to the program and enabling us to assist more folks in the 3 counties.
So just a little history, when the allocation was made at the beginning of the biennium, the program, the wood stove program, kept 75,000 back and didn't allocate it. And then this past summer, when we met, it was clear that certain air agencies like ours were doing, we were spending more money. And so we would not have enough money to finish the biennium. And so the theory was at that point to take that 75 and give it to, and I think there were 3 of us, 3 out of the 6 that got more money to be able to put towards the program. So this 35 is in addition to the original amount that we got. And I would expect that in the spring, we may be looking at this again because, Dan does a great job working with the local jurisdictions, and Clallam and Mason are newer counties to come into the program. And so it takes a little bit of time, and that's why it makes sense to have, this new item so that we can have more flexibility in terms of how it's spent in terms of county versus county. But the other counties are catching up and learning about the program and coming on board. And again, in the spring, before the next biennial budget is put in place, I'm sure there'll be another meeting to look at, okay, who hasn't spent all their money? And we may get another bit of money in the spring. And it always helps to be able to go back to the legislature when you're asking for new money to say, we spent it all. So hopefully we'll be able to get some additional dollars in the spring and then start out with a new allocation in the next biennial budget. I don't know if Dana has anything else he wants to add. You're muted, Dan. You're still muted.
He doesn't want to.
I guess you got nothing to add.
There we go. Sorry.
There we go.
Get in the right application here. I would just note we require pre-approval on jobs, so I can track how much money we allocate before we actually spend it. So when we get an application in, I set that dollar aside. Right now for peer changeout, out of the 295, which includes the 35 additional we're talking about. So we have a total program of 295 through the new program. I've allocated 200,700 of that to date. And that then we need to add in the admin and marketing costs, which are for the total program about 59,000. So we, as Fran said, most likely after the first of the year, when the state says we have agencies not spending money, we're going to come back and say we're going to take another 35 or 50,000.
Dan, can I ask you this 35 grand addition? So there's no admin costs or outreach that's taken out of this. This is just straight pass through?
We do get, and correct me for Lynn, I believe it's 5% for marketing outreach and
10%
for admin.
Yeah.
Basically, we're out of that 35,000, 4,500 is going into the education and outreach component, and 2,400 is for administrative costs.
Great, thank you.
Good question. Any other questions?
I do have one other question.
What?
Have we moved from the term bounty to recycling?
Yeah.
We have, and that was at the request actually of several Native American tribes in Eastern Washington that objected to the bounty title, which is understandable. And so that's a statewide change for all programs. Okay.
It seems like a misappropriation of the word recycling as well, since they are getting money for it. I'm afraid it creates, continues that expectation that people should get paid for recycling, which is, I mean, it's not a big deal. I don't have a problem with it, but it's.
But it's being moved to scrap metalers, which are selling the product. So it is recycling the metal back into the iron stream. So.
Okay.
I think Cash for Clunker's name is available. So.
I know our Yakima County colleagues 10 years or so ago did a burgers for burn barrels program. So they provided coupons to the local burger place like a Dick's for every burn barrel turned in. So
right on.
Like that.
Nice.
So I have a quick question, and it's the third whereas. So when you say for changeouts for wood burning devices to natural gas, propane, or electric appliances, and then you say, and where gas is not an option. So
Mhm.
I guess when you say natural gas and then gas is not an option, I was a little confused by that.
So on the peninsula, they don't have natural gas. So we wanted to be able to put pellet in as an option because they don't have the ability to use natural gas. So that's not
okay.
available for Thurston, only for Mason and Clown.
So I have
Okay,
a
because
question about
that's
that
not
because-
clear there.
Well, I have a question about that because propane is always an option and that's gas. So why would we allow pellets?
Because propane includes an additional cost of rental and installation of a tank. And so that's cost prohibitive for a great number of people. And so even though it's technically a wood smoke reduction grant from the state, and since pellet stoves is such a incredible reduction in smoke output from a cordwood burning device, we opted to allow pellets in those communities where natural gas is not piped to the properties.
Great. Thank you for that.
So
I'm happy
would
to
you,
update the resolution. If you want to change the.
Cynthia?
so when you're saying that it's not available for Mason and Clallam, you have Thurston in there. And so I guess I'm wondering if that Thurston should have been included in that whereas. That's all I'm
Well,
questioning.
it's not available countywide, Cynthia.
Okay. I did not. Okay, that's fine then.
Okay. Good questions.
Mhm. And so the
Okay.
second part of this is attached to the resolution is the 2-page budget amendment reflecting the revenue coming in and obviously the revenue going out, 0 net difference. So it increases our budget authority by 35,000.
Great. So with that, then I'm looking for a motion to approve Resolution 279, Budget Amendment 001, Wood Stove Reduction Grant.
So moved.
I second it.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, so I just want to let the board know that I'm going to abstain from this vote because I'm in the middle of utilizing the program currently at my new house, and it just feels like I should not be voting on this. So with that, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Aye. Great, motion carries with 1 abstention. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so that takes us to our director's reports, and we'll go to Robert and hear about compliance.
Well, thank you for the Rule 1.11 passage. I mean, we're doing our thing for the good of the world. The super heavy smoke that we experienced caused an awful lot of complaints, I think. People were hypersensitive to the smoke issues, and so we seemed to have a bump up in outdoor burn complaints during that time frame. In most areas, we're talking recreational fires. Recreational fires were still legal in many areas, not all areas. But that was one thing that was going on. And the other piece of news we have is in an asbestos case, ORCAA against Mr. Campbell, with the work of our great attorneys, ORCAA prevailed in that case, and they have until, I think, November 6th to appeal to Superior Court.
Yep.
So we shall see how that one ends. And that would be my report for you this morning. Any questions?
Questions for Robert? Okay, thank you, sir.
I just want to point out that that work was done by Mike Throgmorton, not by me. So credit goes where credit's due.
That was pre-baby Mike Throgmorton. I don't know.
Great, thanks, Mike. Okay, so that takes us to engineering with Mark Gooden.
Good morning. You got your industrial commercial air permits list, and I'm just going to go through these, starting with page 1. You'd think that we would be experiencing a lull in permit activity, but exactly the opposite is happening. And I could just say that this is a statewide thing. I was on a call yesterday with my counterparts at the various agencies and Department of Ecology, and there's an uptick in permitting actions needed. So for whatever reason that's happening, it seems to be occurring in the wood products industries. And also there's been an uptick in waste management type associated permits, so like composting and things of that nature. So those two source categories have experienced the majority of the increase in activity. So with that, we'll start on page 1. A Census Specialty Chemicals. This is a company located in Elma, and they make specialty chemicals for the pulp and paper industries primarily, but other industries. And they applied to get a limit on their potential to emit. And what this does is it keeps them out of certain regulatory programs, primarily the Title V Air Operating Permit Program. Okay, so we worked with them. Jennifer DeMay was the engineer on this, and we revised their limits so that they can get out of this program. Those two entries on the page 1 there are associated with this, and the limits became final on September 15th. So we successfully worked with this company to get them out of the Title V program. Okay, so that's pretty big. So now from now on, they'll be considered a minor source and subject to our registration program, and that's a pretty big deal for them. They will be getting out of the Title V program. They won't have as high of annual fees to pay, and they won't be under all the scrutiny that is associated with having to comply with the Title V Air Operating Permit.
Can I just add one thing? So that was a change in EPA. It used to be, and this policy just got changed, although it's actually being appealed, the decision is being appealed, but it was once in, always in for Title V. And so the Trump administration and EPA decided they didn't want that anymore. So they've gone through a public process. It is now, you don't have to be in, and the theory was that once you became Title V, you would continually look for ways to reduce your emissions. They are going to do a good job, a census, in terms of controlling their emissions and keeping it below the AOP limit. But that is a change from what had been a policy by the last administration or money administrations and EPA. But as I say, so they were able to get out of the program. But that decision is being appealed. So I don't know where it ultimately will go. But we've lost one AOP as a result of that change. So anyway, go ahead.
Oh yeah. So the take-home message here is that we have a source that went from major to minor. It's a good thing for them, and it makes a lot of sense. And end of story there. Second one on the list here, BHP Billiton. This was, if you recall, this was a proposal for a extremely large potash transfer facility in Grays Harbor County. And Aaron Manley was the permit engineer. He worked with them. He spent a lot of time with this case, and this company is pulled out. So they have abandoned their efforts to get this facility permitted. So that's a story there. And I'm not sure what the underlying reasons are, but they pulled out.
I can,
And we can only speculate on that.
I talked to Gary Nelson, who's the Grace Harbor, Port of Grace Harbor director, and they pulled out because of SEPA issues. They actually had a really incredible program for the tribe, but it didn't work out. Gary was pretty disappointed, and they'll be working out of the Port of Vancouver. So they have pulled out of Washington and will be working out of the Port of Vancouver.
Okay. Page 2, the DES Capital Campus. This is similar to a census in that the Capital Campus has worked with ORCAA to establish some limits on potential to emit, so that they too may be classified as a minor source, not a major source, and thereby not have to get an air operating permit. So this is good news for them, and it's a long time coming for ORCAA, because if you could imagine having the state Capitol campus with a bunch of combustion equipment, emergency engines and boilers located throughout Thurston County, and trying to adequately regulate them. With this permit that was issued by Lauren Wyber, she was the engineer at ORCAA who was assigned to this case, we can better regulate them in a organized fashion. Plus, they get the security of having the permit that establishes them as a minor source rather than a major source of emissions. Next on the list is Grace Harbor Energy. This is a facility. It's a big power producing facility located in Grace Harbor County at the Satsop Development Park. They've been around since 2010. And we have a contract with the Energy Facility Siting Environmental Council to do all the construction permits and the compliance activities for FSEC. And so they show up on the list because we finally made good with, or FSEC finally made good on issuing their Title V air operating permit. And so that's significant. And I would say that they're now, as far as new things going on, they have a project. It's called the Advanced Gas Pathway Project, whereby they're going to take their existing combustion turbines and retrofit them with new technology to boost their energy output and their efficiency. But also, as a side effect, they will increase emissions. So they're having to go through permitting. And so we've been working with the Department of Ecology and FSEC to facilitate permitting of this advanced gas pathway project. So it's a big deal because this power plant will be able to produce more electricity, and it's producing electricity using natural gas, which is a low carbon footprint fuel. So I think it's significant for our area.
Can I ask you a question about that one, Mark? And pardon me for not having the right terms here, but didn't the state get us out of fossil fuel energy production? And if so, why would we be permitting new facilities that use fossil fuel?
Okay. Let me be clear here. This facility was built and permitted in 2000.
Oh no, I know, but to me it feels new when you replace the guts. So
yeah, it's okay. And to be real clear, they're replacing actual I don't know all the details, but it involves adjusting angles and turbine blades and things of that nature. So they're getting more out of the existing technology. I am not aware of the state abandoning fossil fuel. So I don't know there, but there's certainly combustion of fossil fuel to produce electricity in the state of Washington. So this is, I really don't have an answer for you there. I mean, they've been around and they've been burning natural gas for quite a long time.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know that, and I wish I had this at the tip of my tongue, but I know in the climate planning group I'm on, we've been tracking the state legislation that will get us as a state off of fossil fuel, and that's a state law. And so it seems counterintuitive to allow more emissions when we're on that track, but that might not be our job to regulate. So I appreciate it's fine.
Yeah, and part of our job, and we're working with the Department of Ecology on this because they trigger an ecology permit. Part of our job is to figure out exactly which of the greenhouse gas regulations apply. So far, there's 3 of them. I don't have them committed to memory, so I'm not going to go there right now. But I mean, that's part of our job is figuring out exactly what Washington Administrative Code applies to them. Right? I could just tell you, because we're just undergoing this review, that there's at least 3 of these greenhouse gas type regulations that they will need to comply with, and they will also need to update their greenhouse gas mitigation program, which is pursuant to one of these regulations. So yeah, more to report in the future on this one. And then on page 3, I need to point this one out. This is Sierra Pacific Industries in Aberdeen. And it's a wood products facility. It's a lumber mill. They produce kiln-dried lumber. Their application to us is to replace, to install 8 new lumber dry kilns, and these will be replacing some existing lumber dry kilns. At the same time, they're requesting an increase in their production limits and therefore their emissions. And I just need to point this one out because this one too is going to trigger a state, what they call a prevention of significant deterioration permit action, which is administered by the Department of Ecology. So this one is held up, and work is working with Department of Ecology to try to facilitate them getting through this PSD, Prevention of Significant Deterioration Permit Action. I'm just mentioning it to you because it's quite a complicated process, and Sierra Pacific Industries is working to try to get this approval, of course, as soon as possible, but it is held up by this PSD permit determination. So just heads up on that one. And the last one I'd like to bring up is Silver Springs Organics. This is a composting facility, and they requested approval to change their modifications, to change their operations in such a way that would increase both their capacity to compost as well as their emissions. We came out with a draft preliminary determination, and we sent it by them to do some fact checking just to make sure we were all on the same page. And the short story is that we're requesting that they put additional controls on their initial stages of composting, and we will have meetings hopefully this month with their consultant, their composting consultant, to work out details as to exactly what that will look like, and then we can proceed with the permitting. But this one is stalled because we're essentially saying that we want more controls on the front end of this composting operation. So with that, I think I'll end. And of course, feel free to give me calls or call Fran if you have any detailed questions on any of these cases.
Joan, do you have a question, Joan?
I do. Is this Silver Springs thing doesn't sound like something new to me. In our solid waste advisory that Jim and I are both in, this issue or issues with Silver Springs have gone on and on, different pieces of it anyway, over several years. Is this new?
Well, the facility has been around since, I believe, 2010.
Yeah, I know. I am saying this issue about you wanting more control at the front end of the organic procedure.
Well, it is new in that we are we only have authority to require, in this case, they trigger a permit. And so we have the opportunity to go in and evaluate emissions. And in doing so, I didn't catch that, Jim.
Their expansion triggers the permit, right?
Their expansion triggers the permit. So that gives us the opportunity and the authority to go in and say, hey, we want more controls on here to meet the standards in the state of Washington to allow this increase in emissions. And essentially, if they implement these controls that we're requesting, their emissions will be substantially reduced. So it's the issue of odors is not new. They've taken some pretty big steps in improving things, but we're essentially saying, hey, if you want to increase production and emissions, you got to have some more controls.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
So just Mark, I looked it up while you were talking. I wanted to clarify. So the state has us, they call it getting off of fossil fuel in energy, but it really only applies to coal. So
Right.
that's why it's not.
Oh, yeah.
So talk about a big misstep, but that's just me from a policy perspective.
The big coal facility in
Yeah.
County then. Okay. Makes sense.
Great. Okay. And then I don't know, the Silver Springs thing too. Can you kind of keep us up to date about that as it progresses? I think, it sounds like a pretty large expansion, and I want to make sure that we're able to keep the scent under control as they move forward, because it has been a problem. For folks that aren't from Thurston County, essentially they're going to reformat the same plant to go from rows of composting to a sheet cake of composting.
Oh dear.
Yeah. Oh dear. Right.
Okay. Any other questions for Mark? Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, Odell, for the air quality report.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen here if it allows me to. There we go. All right, so this is sort of an exciting, can you all see my screen? Did that go through? Okay. So our wonderful September of air quality was just awesome, as I'm sure you all know. But it did afford some pretty spectacular photographs. So I changed our board report cover photograph. This was submitted by Lauren Wybrew's sister. And I just thought although it's horrible to breathe, it was such a pretty picture of the snow.
That would have been up in San Juan's then, right? Was that her sister's in San Juan? That would have been
Yeah, this is up in the San Juans, Hummel Lake.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next slide is one you're used to seeing, but with a lot more numbers. And I had to add in another category for air quality that we have not yet seen since I've been giving these board reports for a daily average. And not only did we use it, but we used it quite spectacularly in all of our counties. Port Townsend was the winner with only 1 day of hazardous air quality as the 24-hour average, but the rest somewhere between 3 and 5 on all of these days. So that break between very unhealthy and hazardous. You can see our averages for, this is the average air quality in the month of September in all of our counties was well over the unhealthy for every day. So that's pretty bad. And if we didn't have the opportunity to file an exceptional event with EPA, that would be indicative that we were over the NAAQS for the year. This many days of unhealthy air would definitely put us over the NAAQS for the 24-hour average. But we can file the exceptional event, and so we don't have to be concerned that we will be considered non-attainment or have to implement federal reference monitors. So I guess that's okay. So a question we got, or I got a lot this month was, is this the worst wildfire smoke year we've had? And if I showed this graph for the entire state of Washington, 2018 actually shows more days or more time spent in unhealthy or worse than 2020. But I asked Beth, she works for the Department of Ecology, she made this plot for the Washington Smoke blog. And I said, well, could you make that just for the western side of the states, for the western states? And so she did, and she was actually surprised at the difference as well. But what this shows is that from June through September of 2020, we spent over 20% of the time in either unhealthy or worse air quality, which is pretty remarkable. The 2018, about 16% of the time, and then in 2017, about 10%. Also bad, but not even close to as bad as what we experienced this year. So September was remarkably bad for us over here in Western Washington. Another way to look at this data, so this was the total percent of time. This is the number of consecutive days that the WACA was very unhealthy or worse. So not just unhealthy, but very unhealthy. And I've put in red where all of our counties are. And this is for every county in the state. And this is for 2017, 2018, and 2020, which were the last 3 bad years. So you can see, like in Chelan, this blue bar from 2018 is actually a little bit higher or longer than the dark blue bar for 2020. So depending on where you are in the state, this was a really bad year, but it was fairly similar to 2018. But for us here, you can see that the dark blue bar for 2020 in all of our counties was significantly worse. And in some of these counties, they didn't really even see that in 2018 or 2017. So again, really, yes, this is the worst wildfire smoke year, I think, for us at least, that we've experienced in a long time, as far as I can remember.
Adele,
so
can I ask a question about that?
You can.
I want to confirm my quick analysis of this. So does this mean that kind of the ocean facing Pacific and Grays Harbor, they suffered more from the, I mean, obviously we all suffered from the Oregon fire, but in 2018, as an example, does that mean that it was mostly Washington, or, I mean, can you analyze that distinction where this is?
Okay, so in order to make it onto this graph, you had to have at least 2 consecutive days. So 1 day doesn't mean consecutive. So this is where you're just back to back. So so Grays Harbor in 2018 and 2017 had a few days that were unhealthy. I'm not sure if they were very unhealthy. I'd have to go back and look at that data. You're asking if because they're on the coast, are they cleaner than the other states? And that is not necessarily true, especially in September, where our worst air quality was actually coming off of the Pacific Ocean. So what happened was easterly winds in Northern California and Oregon blew all of the smoke out over to the Pacific Ocean, where then the southerly winds picked it up and recirculated it back in over Washington. And so in that case, Pacific and Grays Harbor were actually some of our worst sites, and they were the first ones to see that really bad smoke. So when we were looking for that smoke coming in, I was keeping an eye on those monitors, because I knew that that was going to give me an idea of how bad it was going to get when it finally reached some of the inland sites like Mason County and Thurston County.
You're talking
It just
this year now, right? Was
Yeah.
that the case? So I guess my question really is this smoke coming up from California and Oregon off the coast and then coming in, was that a kind of a newer experience, or not as common an experience as we've had in the past?
it's not as well. We have seen that before. I believe we did see that in 2018. I can send you some of the satellite images. 2018, we saw it coming down from British Columbia and up from California along the coast. 2018 was really unique in that we had smoke coming from Eastern Washington, we had smoke coming from British Columbia, and we had smoke coming up from Oregon and California. And it was, in some of the satellite pictures, you could actually see these layers of different smoke from different source areas. So each year, I guess I can only say each year is really unique.
Odell, can I interject here?
You can, definitely.
I think it was actually your presentation from a year or two ago that showed the jet stream oscillation and wavelength has changed. So really what that means is we don't know what's going to happen in the future, because the climate is changing so much that we're seeing more of the offshore flow, that eastern flow, as Odell mentioned, push this smoke into a big storage bank off the Pacific. And then when the normal onshore flow came back, it pushed that all back to us. So that's not something I've been working for ORCAA for almost 16 years. Again, these past 3 years that Odell are referencing are the only ones we've really seen these smoke events. So we're seeing changes that we really can't map because we don't know what the jet stream is doing, what the climate is doing, and what the seasonal winds are going to be doing.
That is a very good assessment. Thank you, Dan. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And the other piece of that I want to point out is, I don't know how many of you were able to follow or knew about the WA smoke blog that Ecology and some of the rest of us kept updating, but our forecasts kept being wrong. We would predict, oh, there's a system that's going to move through and help clear this out, and then that system wouldn't arrive. And that's because the smoke itself will also change the weather patterns and set up inversions that make that basically it's a positive reinforcement or a positive feedback, where the smoke comes in and then sets up an inversion that stabilizes the atmosphere, and then it doesn't, those systems that we expect to move it out don't move it out. So as Dan mentioned, climate change is an issue. And then again, the smoke itself will mess with the weather patterns and change those forecasts so that the models can't pick them up.
The one positive I would leave you with is it didn't assist us greatly this season. It helped California more, but Odell and I have both sat in on phone calls with NASA. And so we're able to utilize NASA and space-based satellite research better these days than ever before. And NASA has been really instrumental in working with the National Weather Service, NOAA, and the air agencies to do some modeling and monitoring of what's going on in the upper atmosphere.
And I
That
think
is true.
To sort of end that, this piece of it is, sadly, this is not the end. You know, we're going to be seeing more of this in the years to come unless things change. So,
Yeah. So, any other questions on these slides? Okay. So this is the ozone for September. September is the last month that we officially track ozone. It's a summer pollutant. The 78-hour average of 70 parts per billion is the national ambient air quality standard. We didn't reach that. I did want to point out this interesting, you'll see a spike here beginning on September 7th and going through till about September 11th. And that can be or may be attributed to the first smoke event that we had. So I don't know if you remember this, but our board meeting, I think, was on September 8th after that smoke event rolled through. And that first smoke event came in from Eastern Washington. So that one came in from the east. And we saw that hit our monitors, and it was like a wall of smoke. It just hit the monitors and came through. But the amount, and that was coming from the Evans Canyon fire and a few of the other fires. Actually, I don't think it was Evans Canyon. I think it was one further east in the Okanagan. But wildfire smoke can amplify ozone concentrations. But it's a really complicated relationship because it can also suppress ozone buildup. And so there's a lot of volatile organic compounds in wildfire smoke, and you need that to have an ozone buildup. But you also need sunlight. You need UV light to break those compounds down and actually create the ozone. So it's a delicate balance of volatile organic compounds coming in the smoke, but not so much smoke that you block out the sun. If you block out the sun with all the smoke, then the ozone isn't going to be created. And so what we're seeing here, which is really interesting, is you see this amplification in the ozone relative to normal concentrations at this time of year from that first smoke event where we got a lot of surface layer smoke, but not a lot in the atmosphere. And then bam, the wind switched back to, as Dan mentioned, the normal westerlies. And this is the second smoke event here that occurred between, I call it the second smoke event, but they were really back to back. So it's hard to say second. And here you see this, when the California smoke came in off the Pacific, and we had a much thicker column of smoke, which really blocked the sunlight for days on end. I think that ended around the 18th. And now you see that the ozone is less. And so that's just some really interesting atmospheric chemistry to show how the wildfire smoke can both amplify, but also decrease ozone concentrations. That's pretty much the only interesting thing to show there. Other monitoring news, we've continued to, we resumed our site visits as normal through this pandemic. We did fix the Shelton site, had some communication issues during the smoke event, which was difficult because people were really looking to get hourly updates on the air quality, and Shelton was only reporting in about once every 4 or 5 hours. So that was kind of a problem, but we were able to fix that. And for right now, it's reporting properly. The nephelometer at Raymond got real dirty after this smoke event, and Mike wasn't able to calibrate it. So that one, we lost some data there until we could replace that one. I continued working on our toxics report for EPA from the toxics project, and that's due next month. So I should be able to give you a summary of the findings of that report soon when we have time during the meeting and not such a full schedule. I was also asked to help Ecology with the smoke blog, and so that was kind of a fun thing to do, which was to communicate directly with the public and answer the public's questions about the smoke event. And we got really, really excellent feedback on that blog, and it was, most people seem to really enjoy that back and forth with members of Ecology and myself and some other of the agencies around.
And one thing to say is I got feedback from Ecology, and they really appreciated Odell's expertise and the fact that she was willing to, participate in the blog. They really, felt that her assistance was absolutely incredibly helpful. So
Thanks, friend. And then I attended the EPA Purple. I mentioned this Fire Air Now website during the last meeting for you guys to use. And we did attend sort of an after the fact EPA Purple Air sensor webinar where they explained about their corrections and how they are, you know, quality controlling the data and how they're using the data. And I was really pleased with the amount of work that they've put into that. And their correction algorithm is now available on the Purple Air website. So for after listening to this webinar and all the work and all of the data analysis that went into developing this this correction factor, that would be my recommendation at this point, is to use that correction factor if you are using the Purple Air website. It's the EPA correction factor at the top of the page. I also, I want one other thing that's not on here. I attended, there was a conference call with the National Weather Service out of Seattle and Spokane, and it was sort of between the Weather Service and Ecology and EPA and the local airs, addressing what the National Weather Service's role is in declaring air quality alerts in the future and how they can work with us. And so there were a couple little bumps in that, and I think going forward, we are going to have a much smoother ride with them and a lot more communication. And I really enjoyed that discussion. And I think that's going to be real helpful for future smoke events to work with the National Weather Service. They have that set up to be able to quickly alert people, and they've got people there 24 hours a day. So if a smoke event comes through at 2 o'clock in the morning, they've got weather forecasters there that can issue an alert while the rest of us are asleep. So that's really a helpful collaboration there.
Odell?
Yes.
When they do that, do they have the ability to use the Washington Air Quality Index when there's an alert here, or does it have to be the EPA?
No, they're a federal agency and they are going to use the AQI. And the difference between WOCA and AQI did create a lot of confusion. That was actually my contribution to the smoke blog, was explaining the difference between those two. And I think moving forward, we'll have to see how we address that and what we do with that, because while the WOCA is more protective and I believe it to be more appropriate to informing people, it does create a lot of confusion. So we are going to have to figure out how to work with ecology on maybe making some of these things more uniform, because going from site to site, people are seeing different numbers and different colors, and that does create a lot of confusion for people. So I'm not sure how that's going to work in the future, but for now, National Weather Service will use the EPA AQI. I mean, they're federal, so it makes sense.
And there was also confusion about who actually, gives the air quality alert, who puts it in place. So that was part of the discussion too, in terms of whether it's ecology and National Weather Service. So it was a really good conversation.
Yeah.
I'm
so
glad you talked about that.
Oh, what we decide.
I was just saying, I'm really glad that you've discussed that, because that was terribly confusing when I was checking things.
You're not alone. A lot of people were confused about that. And one of the things that we addressed with the National Weather Service is that when air quality, we basically set a certain benchmark for if air quality gets to this level, and through the weather, the National Weather Service, it appears that it will stick around for more than 48 hours. They have the authority to issue an air quality alert, and then give us a call, and we'll have a call, ahead of time, so that they can do that rapid response. I think because they've got people that are there. One of the women from National Weather Service said, "Well, I'm there at 2 o'clock in the morning. What do I do? Can I do that?" And so I think that was one of the most helpful things, was to provide guidelines on when and how they can do that. And that is all I have, unless you have any other questions.
Great update. Thank you. Any further questions? Good discussion. Okay, so that takes us to education and outreach. Dan?
So I'll just continue on off of Odell's presentation and note that the AQI WACA has been a discussion of the Northwest Air Quality Communicators Group for a number of years since the WACA was created. And it was originally called the Washington Air Quality Index, but they changed it because they didn't want to be known as the WACI. So we have been aware of that. So the basic message that the communicators group is continually pushing is that regardless of which measurement you're looking at, if you leave the green zone, take the proper precautions. So whether it's WACA or AQI, if you leave good air quality, just be aware of the dangers and the things you need to take into account for your personal behaviors and activities.
So Dan, let me just say at the air directors meeting that we had in September, this was a major piece of conversation. Puget Sound Clean Air uses AQI. So not all the air agencies are consistent in terms of what they use. So we're going to have a conversation again in January. I was pushing ecology. They supposedly are working with the Department of Health. We want some consistency. We need to have a good message that's clear and consistent for the state. So this conversation is not over, and it'll be discussed again in January. The air directors are basically saying, hey, maybe the opportunity is here to make a change and to go with AQI because it is the federal, it's the federal system. And basically the ecology said, no, we're not going to go through a rule change. We're not doing it. So the best we could do, because they control that, is to say, okay, let's talk to the Department of Health. Let's see what we can do. And Dan's right. I mean, once you get past green, and you start getting into unhealthy for sensitive groups and unhealthy, people get hung up on the colors. And so the message is really important. Excuse me. So we're trying to be the air agencies want to be more consistent. And it would be nice if all air agencies were using the same system and we're not. That's another problem. So this
how do they get out of using the state system as a clean air agency in Washington? That seems they're causing the confusion.
They're part of the Puget Sound is part of the problem. They don't go through ecology. See, we work through ecology. They have their own full-time IT person that can manage the data. We don't have that. They're a huge agency. There's 70 people. They're much larger. Their budget's much larger. So they've got the capacity to do that. We don't, and most of the air agencies don't. They're our size or smaller. So they can do as they please. We can't. And we get all of our data through ecology.
I would also note that some of our partners, like Spokane Regional Clean Air, shares a border with Idaho.
Right.
They use AQI because their marketing and communications network is cross-border. Plus, they use EPA's outreach tools, so they're tied into AQI. Right. Southwest seems to do a little of both AQI, and they are primarily AQI or WACA, but they do a bit of AQI because of the shared border with Oregon. And same with Benton. They share a border with Oregon, but they're mostly WACA. So it's an ongoing discussion, as Fran said. It's something we've dealt with, and that's why most of the communications you'll see are really focused on the color and not the numbers, because at the very least, both systems share the same color palette. So the breakouts are at a different level, but if people are just looking at colors, the messaging is very similar.
So there is mine. Thank you.
Going on beyond that, you'll notice I included in the board packet a page of some links of seeing that we're in a Zoom meeting. It's pretty obvious we're in a digital communication world these days. And our online communications has been really vital. So I shared a bunch of links to our online mapping. And some of those you'll be familiar with. Some of them are linked through our website for public consumption, such as the current asbestos permits. Some are just for staff use, such as the land clearing burn permits, which change rapidly and are really used for compliance. So that's a compliance map. We currently have 22 ongoing land clearing burns throughout our jurisdiction that we permit. Our Thurston County Burn Permit Program, I want to talk about that a little bit. That's really been successful, even though I know it creates some heartburn for some of us when we see 15 days or 14 days into the burn season, we have essentially 1,000 burn permits out there for Thurston County. About 3 or 4 years ago, we'd have 1,000 burn permits, and 3 to 5% of those would be invalid. They'd be people applying for permits within the cities and urban growth areas. Last year, that number dropped to 1.5% of the applications we got were in invalid areas. Today, looking right now, we have 8 invalid permits for 998 applications. So we're at 0.8%. So each year, our education has helped remind people that they're not allowed to burn in cities and urban growth areas, and the number of applications has dropped by half each year since our online permits have gone online. So that I see that as a success, that we're getting the word out and that our online permit system is working. I've talked to Robert and Fran. We've talked about trying to make this region-wide. A lot of the fire districts do their own online residential outdoor burning, or they actually do paper permits. So being able to provide online services to our other counties is something we're definitely looking at and we'll be talking to the fire districts about. The other digital communications we want to talk about is our email alert program. And I was shocked, just in the last 30 days, we've had 556 new subscribers to our online email alerts. So people are getting their news from us directly, or they're getting it and sharing it through their homeowners or neighborhood associations. So our numbers are just about, just below 10,000 subscribers right now. Last year at this time, it was about 4,800. So we've doubled the number of subscribers we're getting, and the people that are pushing those out to other subscribers through their local networks is about 30% of those are pushing those to other people. So we're seeing great use of digital communications. Also of note, our gas station map, which I included on that list. Since the summer, we've seen 118 uses of that map. And again, that map is a list of all of our gasoline dispensing sources and all of their testing requirements. So whether it's the sources looking at it or the testing facilities looking at it, people are using that map to see what's required to meet their permitting requirements. So that, and then the wood stove change out we've talked about previously. We added the 35,000 and we're looking really good to meet the or fully expend that program by the end of the calendar year, I'm thinking. So assuming the state and reasonably assuming the state's going to have funding still available after the first of the year, we'll probably come back to you for another 30 to 50,000 after the first of the year for another budget amendment.
So just
For Dan.
on the gas station, we streamline the gas station permitting process, but they then are more responsible to get the testing. So this is important, and it's good that they are going online to look because they've got to do the testing. So this is a good system, and again, we want to streamline things for these sources.
Yeah, and the testing facilities that are checking, they can actually go on and see the facility they're going out to do tests on. And by clicking on this map, they can see exactly which tests they have to perform to meet the permitting requirements. And that was something we developed. Lauren Wybrew, our engineer in charge of the gas stations, and Robert and his team helped create this network of exactly what facilities are out there and what each individual facility is required for testing requirements. So the other map I wanted to highlight and forgot to was the wood smoke reduction grant map. And I'm pretty sure that's linked on your report, but that shows of every wood stove project since 2011 is mapped. So the green are the current season, but if you zoom in on the map on that link, you'll see all of the other colors. So before the 1921 session, all of those are in Thurston County. For this current budget season, you'll see them in Mason and Clallam as well, but you can see the density of wood stove changeouts in Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, especially in their urban growth areas, because that's where it was restricted in prior years. And we've had a pretty good density, especially in Lacey and Olympia. Tumwater has had good representation, but Lacey and Olympia really was the primary density of our previous wood stove changeouts. And you can see the numbers each year as well. So ranging from 182 in one biennium to we're well over 280, I believe, this season. So
Great. Anything for Dan? So Dan, just one set of questions for me. Can you email us the data you just cited around outdoor burning, at least the Thurston County reps, so we have those numbers? And then I'd be curious if there's another data point from Robert's book of business that either matches or doesn't, the complaints from outdoor burning in the cities and urban growth area. And if you could get with him and see if that's something you could pull together, it would be wonderful. And just as a reminder to everyone, we reached out and did outreach to try to look at charging a fee when we instituted those permits. And we were told because of the lack of compliance in the cities and counties, or in the cities and urban growth areas, we really had some work to do. And this is a huge success. And so I would like to, see what the outreach plan and the timeline would be to get to a full regional online permit. And then also, what would the outreach plan be to get to a decision around a fee in Thurston County in time for our budget season for next year's budget? So I think those would be sort of next steps in that conversation for the ORCAA board. And Fran and I can look at, kind of the timeline and the meetings, but I want to make sure we don't get too close to the budget before we have that conversation.
okay, yeah, I can certainly work with Robert and we can compare numbers.
I just want to make sure we're not seeing a spike in, in complaints because people just aren't doing the permit.
and that's certainly, I was going to say, it's a double-edged sword of, are we seeing better compliance with the permitting, but not with actual burning? And so that's something we need to look at, because if people realize they can't apply for a permit, but they're still going ahead with burning because they know if they don't get a permit, they're not going to be on our radar. So that's something I don't know, but I know that our numbers of invalid permit applications has dropped precipitously by roughly 50% per year. So
it's cool. Great. Anything else? Okay, so thank you very much, Dan. So we'll go to Lynn for the finance update.
Yeah, well, pretty much Cynthia provided a minor summary of our finance committee meeting that did cover the first quarter report. And, it's a positive report. There's nothing unusual or that needs to be reported or highlighted. The fact that we have received 30% of our budgeted revenues is really good news. And the grant work And the reimbursements reflecting that, you'll be seeing that in the second quarter because we submit our request on a quarterly basis. And that would include the wood stove education, the wood smoke reduction, the PM 2.5, the Chica Peak, the community scale air toxics, the core federal and state, and the FSET. So all those require reporting on a very regular basis. And my job is easier when all the departments make their reports. It's all the paperwork that I do behind the scenes. So, but on the expenditure side, you know, it is 24% of expenditures that have occurred 3 months into the year. A big chunk of that had to do with our annual premium for Endurus, $33,000. Other than that, there's nothing unusual to report on the expenditure side. Both revenues and expenditures are following suit as should be. We're on target. Our checkbook is in very good shape as well with the Thurston County Treasurer's Office. We started the year with 1.7. 3 months into the year, we're at 1.8 million. Again, a good report card to share with the board, of course, and staff. And other than, you know, pushing a lot of paper, you know, to our various entities, requesting reimbursements, showing our workloads as a backup to support our request. All is good, you know, in the finance, budget, wellness, HR, grants. So, but all is good. That's all I have, board, unless there's any questions.
Thank you, Lynn. Any questions from the report? You have the details in your packet. So if you see anything there you'd like to chat with, just give Fran and Lynn a call. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, Fran, bring us home.
Okay, so COVID update. Staff are still working remotely. I anticipate that engineers, other than Mark is here in the office for the most part, we're working remotely until sometime next year. My focus is that once we have a vaccine, then we can start bringing folks back into the office. And as everybody knows, we don't know when that'll be. And we don't know what the priority order will be for folks being able to receive that vaccine. I have actually sent information out to staff about getting a flu shot, and I'm hoping that people did that. I can't compel people to get the flu shot, but since the flu and the COVID have very similar symptoms, I'm hoping that for people's own safety that they are doing that. We're doing inspections, we're responding to complaints. So work is getting done. It's just being done in a different fashion. And I look forward to the time when we can have all staff back here. I mentioned the AQI WACA situation. That was a major portion of our discussion with the air directors when we met in September. And as I indicated, there was a lot of concern and feeling that ecology really needed to take a stronger role in leadership on this. And so if they don't, we as the air directors will be pushing that. So we'll see what we gave them until January to have more conversation with the Department of Health. And at that point, we'll see where things go. There was another piece that came up during when we had all the smoke. 3 of the 6 counties, so Mason, Jefferson, and Pacific counties put in place no recreational fires when smoke was so bad. And I know that this year, you know, we're done with our burn bans for fire safety purposes, but it's something that I hate to say it, but I feel that we're based on climate change, that we are going to see more smoke events in the years to come. And so it'd be something that maybe you, as you know, from your different jurisdictions can think about, those that allow recreational fires, that if we have another event, and Ty is not there today for Thurston County, but that you might think about not allowing recreational fires when we have that extreme event. People were suffering, and even though they were allowed, as I say, those 3 counties did not allow them, which I think was at least somewhat helpful for folks during that period of time. It was really stressful. We got a lot of phone calls from folks. They were really appreciative of the information that we were putting out through our website, through emails, through, Twitter and, all the social media. And they just really appreciated having someplace to call and to talk to somebody. So it was nice to be here in the office to be able to get calls directly and chat with folks. I think, I couldn't solve their problem, but at least we could give them resources. And they had somewhere where they could call and talk to someone. And then we used to, what I would say to folks is, we're not a health department. So for public health issues, please contact your health department or your own physician. But,
So Fran,
that. Yes.
you said there were 3 counties that put a ban on recreational fires. That was Pacific County, and what were the other 2?
Mason, Jefferson, and Pacific counties.
Mason.
Thank you, Greg. Yeah.
Thank you.
And that was helpful. And so for the other 3 counties, it's something to think about for years to come. As I said, this, I think, going to be sadly, a repeat situation.
Hey, Fran.
Yes.
What would you think about sending a memo to the member counties, just highlighting some of Odell's data and that 3 did and the rest didn't, and with just kind of putting it in front of them to think about it now, what their policy might be next summer?
I'd be happy to do that. That's something that the rest of you would support?
Everybody okay with that?
Yes, I will say that in Jefferson County, it wasn't the commissioners that did it. It was the fire district. So, including the fire districts in that would be helpful.
So send a memo to the commissioners, to the counties and fire districts.
Perfect.
Got it.
We're not telling them what to do. We're just telling them how we saw this picture and we hope they'll think about it.
Right. And it's something to think about for the future. And, but I think we may be up against it again next summer, sadly. And the only other comment I have is that, remember, we have no meeting in November because it's Veterans Day. And so we decided to meet in December this year versus November. So we've got to make our 10 meetings. So no meeting next month, but then we have a meeting in December. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
So December will be the last meeting, at least for Wes. Do we know if we have anyone else going off?
Not that I'm aware of, but again, the commissions and the city councils make determinations in January about committee membership. So there could be changes. I hope you all stay. I'm sorry to see Wes. I'm sorry to see you go. You've been a great asset to the board. So again, I don't know what different jurisdictions will determine in terms of committee assignments.
Unfortunately, we can't give you cake.
We'll eat cake.
We'll talk to Fran and we'll figure out how to get
cake in front of you.
Yeah, we'll show you a cake.
Great. Okay, thanks for that update on the date. So no meeting in November. And then maybe in January, Fran, when all of our jurisdictions are talking about their membership, it might be a good idea with the counties to reinforce that they can have a staff alternate. It seems like every year it gets worse during budget season. The county budgets are so strapped and they don't have the same tools that the cities have, and that makes it harder for them to participate in their interjurisdictionals. And so just reminding them that they can send someone from their health department or some other staff, then we can make sure we can maintain our business.
Okay, I'll be happy to do that.
Great. Anything else for the good of the order?
Jim, can I add one thing?
Dan, go ahead.
So I completely forgot to mention, and I totally apologize, but I've been working on asbestos and demolition outreach to the counties and cities, and I wanted to call out Grace Harbor County. I think it's Mark Sigler, was specifically complimentary of ORCAA, and most specifically Mike Schultz for the work he's done in that county. So I wanted to make sure that our compliance supervisor, Mike Schultz, was called out as receiving compliments from Grace Harbor County for doing an outstanding job with that community.
That's great. Like to end on a kudo. That's cool. Thanks, Dan. Anything else for the good of the order? We have no executive sessions.
Nope.
We're adjourned. I'll see you all in December. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good Thanksgiving.
Bye, guys. Take care.
Be safe. Wear a mask.